Hey again, ladies and gents, Jed Bratt here with the Real Estate Jedi of Big Block Realty here in San Diego with your monthly San Diego County real estate market update. In this market report, we're going to be talking about the standard year-over-year numbers that we always take a look at, interest rates and potential changes or proposed changes in the Fed fiscal policy as it pertains to the federal funds rate, the national economy and the June jobs report, and what sort of sentiment we're seeing in the broad sense as it pertains to the market, as well as other things to be considering and keeping top of mind when you're looking or listening to these numbers, whether it's from my videos or anybody else's. And as always, thank you for watching. And if you find value in this, please share it with anybody else who you think might also find value in it. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Real Estate Jedi's YouTube channel, and you will be the first to get these reports as soon as they come out. As always, thanks for watching, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's dive in and let's take a look at what we always start at, and that's active listings. As always, we're looking at all price ranges. Previously, sometimes I've selected all property types. Right now, I'm just doing detached, townhomes, twin homes, row homes, and all other attached. So that's just going to be our standard bread and butter residential. This is for San Diego County, and I have no other restrictions set on the search. So you can see we have active listings. This is our monthly inventory. I'm sorry, not monthly inventory. This is our year-over-year inventory. And you can see that we have more inventory in the market, almost 7% than we did the same time last year. We've discussed this many times. We had this big ramp up of inventory growth when interest rates were going up last year. And then this beginning of this year, it started to kind of reverse course. Typically right now, we'd be seeing a lot higher inventory increase every single summer. The high season is going to be in the summer. And we're not seeing that spike up as rapidly as possible because it's kind of absorbing some of the excess inventory that we had previously. So, and that's, of course, I think, partly tied to the lower rates compared to where we were end of last year. We were almost at 5%, and now we're much, much lower, and we'll talk about rates here in a minute. Next, let's look at months of inventory. You can see we're almost up 20% across San Diego County. This is the month's supply we have if there was to be no more inventory coming on the market and everything was to continue selling at the current rate it has been selling per month. So that would mean that we'd only be able to last about 2.6 months until we ran out of supply. So again, that's a number that's increased. That's, of course, tied more or less directly to active listings in correlation with sold. Next, let's look at pending sales, down 2.5%. Solds are down 2.8%, so really no major fluctuation there, and those in and of themselves don't tell us a whole lot. But the active listings, as long as that continues to hold steady and interest rates continue where they kind of are, I mean, this is probably going to continue with the annual typical seasonal trends. At least that's what we would normally see. But let's talk about a few other things. Sales price, I'll just show it to you just so you have a reference. So we're up 2.6% for median sales price across San Diego County. Not a huge increase compared to some of the gains we've been seeing in previous years, right? So let's talk about a few other things. Let's look real quick. All right, well, this is the San Diego MLS, and we're looking at the same criteria, all active listings, detached, all the attached townhomes and twin homes, and we have currently, as of Friday, the 14th of June, we have around 7,200 active listings across San Diego County, just for a ballpark reference in the middle of the month. Now let's talk about real quick the employment situation. So the June jobs report was a little bit disappointing. To you and I, this might not mean a heck of a lot, but I'm just bringing it up because it's a factor that influences people's perception of how the economy is changing and the health of the economy, and they might also correlate that information to the health of the real estate market, even though technically speaking they can act in somewhat parallel, but at other times they're completely disconnected and not directly correlated with each other. So nonetheless, let's just take a look at that. So we gained 75,000 jobs, but I think that was down from, I think it anticipated around, I might be wrong, 180,000, 185,000, something of that nature. So over 100,000 less than they initially anticipated. And this kind of ties into the narrative that the economy is somewhat slowing a little bit from the growth that we've been seeing in past years, at least in the last few years. And this also ties into the global growth slowing, which also ties into the next thing, which is that there's actually a possibility that the Fed is looking at cutting rates for the first time in over a decade as early as this summer, as early as next month. And this comes completely, from a different place than originally at the beginning of the year. Actually, at the end of 2018, we were sort of the thought pattern that there was a chance the Fed was going to actually go forward and increase rates as many as 3, possibly 4 times this year as they had initially, as they were kind of anticipating in 2018. Well, obviously, that was put at a quick halt in the beginning of the year when they started seeing the slowing that we could even see in the real estate market here. But they saw, a lot of outlooks for the national GDP, for global growth to be slowing significantly. And of course, the Fed's job, I don't mean to say of course, but if you don't understand, the Fed's job, more or less, is to try to keep the economy balanced. Their job is not to overstimulate or understimulate the market. They try to keep it in check as much as possible. And they do this with their federal policy of the federal funds rate. And we've talked about this numerous times in other videos, but it's worth bringing to your attention that there is a chance that they're pointing to an 80% odds that in July they might cut interest rates further. And right now, we are actually seeing some of the lowest interest rates we've seen in many years, actually, and actually a couple of years. So if we look at the 30-year fixed rate mortgage average in the United States, we are around 3.82, and the last time we saw anything close to this was, we were at, let's just look, 3.83, September 2017. So just under 2 years back was the last time we saw rates this low. So if the Fed drops rates again, that's going to be definitely something that's going to impact many things, especially buyer affordability. Because, of course, when buyers take out a loan to buy a home, their payment is directly tied to the interest rate. And if they have a lower interest rate, they can afford to buy more home or more property for the same exact payment. And I'm just showing you real quick, this is the effective funds rate. So you don't see this directly in the 30-year fixed rate. This is mortgage rates. The Fed fund rate does not directly dictate what the mortgage rates are going to be like, but of course it's an underlying factor. So as you can see, like I mentioned before, the Fed has not dropped rates since 2007, right at the beginning of that recession. That's when they started dropping rates. And that was the last time they dropped them, because we were pretty much essentially at around zero for the longest period of time we've ever been. In fact, there's few times we've even come close to touching zero. So again, this is a tool of the Fed to kind of control growth and expansion and combat potential inflation in an overly expanding economy. And if they were to drop rates from their current rates, which is around 2.5%, I think the target right now is 2.25 to 2.5%. If they were to drop that, let's say a quarter of a point, that's going to put us down to 2 to 2.25. You might see that same quarter point drop effectively in certain areas in the mortgage market. But that's directly going to impact buyer affordability, and that's going to possibly, stimulate the economy more. Now, something I want to drive absolutely home is that just because, and this might be counterintuitive, just because interest rates drop and buyer affordability goes up, that means more people can afford to buy a home. They can afford to buy more home for the same payment. Just because that goes up does not automatically mean the market's going to go on fire. It does not mean the market's going to continue to go up. I'm not saying it indicates anything other than that. That would be the most logical conclusion from that. But just historically speaking, understand that there's been many times, if you just even look back at the most recent recession, where, of course, they were dropping interest rates like crazy. Look at this. They dropped to actually 5 points. So I got a mortgage at like a 6% rate somewhere in here. And that at the time was actually a great rate. And then the rates just kept coming. I refinanced 3 times on one single property over like a 3-year period. and I ended up saving about $600 per month on that payment. And still, people weren't running for properties as they were, as they are in sometimes rate increasing environments. So anyway, I don't want to take too much time on this. Just wanted to draw this to your attention. Understand that there are possibly going to be lower rates in the future. How that correlates to real estate in San Diego County is yet to be found out. What we do know is that still inventory is on its way down, and we had that increase and it's on its way down, which indicates that demand is in excess of supply, and that if there was greater affordability for buyers, that would only really logically make sense that it would continue to drive the market upwards. But understand that that's being driven upwards with the aid of the Fed's stimulus policy. So either way, things to keep in mind and keep your eye on. I will keep you in the loop when I have any more information on any of this stuff, of course, in future videos. Here's another headline. The International Monetary Fund cuts 2019 global growth outlook. And the Fed has revised theirs, I think, as recently as March. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I wanted to talk to you about a few things real quick to keep top of mind and consider when you're looking at these numbers, whether they're from me or whether they're from somebody else. I've seen a lot of videos lately where some of this data is being presented as either good or bad inherently. It's like, oh, well, this is similar to what it was last year, so that's good, or this changed since last year, so that's bad, or blah, 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 blah. The truth of the matter is nothing is inherently good or bad when it comes to this data. Now, I mean, of course, certain things you can be like, oh, well, Jed, sales prices are down $100,000. That's bad. Well, the truth of the matter is everything is what you make out of it. So for one person, something that might be good might be horrible for somebody else, and vice versa. The things to look at is how does this information likely impact your strategy and where your mental model for making decisions. How is this going to change the outcome of the goals you're trying to achieve with real estate? And really try to understand also how these numbers are going to affect or influence other people. For example, in my opinion, much of all the activity that goes on in the market, I mean, real estate is supply and demand. So those basic factors are always going to come into prices, but the extremities are almost always going to be exaggerated because of human emotion. So if you can instead shift your mindset and say, well, how are these factors going to influence human emotion? How are people going to react to this information? Or what will this likely cause? I mean, because some things are strictly cause and effect. I mean, if wages got cut in half, then plain and simple, people aren't going to be able to afford things. But what's going to happen? Are those wages going to get cut in half first before prices drop, or are prices going to drop on the emotional reaction that they hear wages are going to drop? So just understand that everything goes in cycles, right? Emotions go in cycles, markets go in cycles. Seasons go in cycles. Everything is cycles, including human emotion. So if people perceive things to be bad, like if the jobs report was extra bad, you see that reflected you see the sentiment reflected in the stock market almost instantaneously. And while real estate in the past has been one of the less efficient markets, efficient meaning as quickly as information is available, the market reacts, right? More or less. It's a very broad definition of that. But stocks have tended to be much more efficient than real estate. And I still think you're going to be able to find some great deals in real estate because it tends to be very inefficient. However, that is changing much more rapidly and drastically just because of how quickly we can get information nowadays. But keep in mind, things aren't necessarily good or bad, but how is that going to impact the mental model of other people? How are they going to, because I don't think a lot of people actually don't have mental models. They don't have thinking models. They mostly just react emotionally. So if you can take this data and say, how can I apply this to my thinking model, my decision-making model, and anticipate what's likely to happen based on humans reacting emotionally to these things, then you can use it to make much better decisions. But just understand, just because something's up or down doesn't make it good or bad. Just because somebody's a salesperson and they sell a certain product doesn't mean they understand the fundamentals of it whatsoever. They might just be really good at sales. So just some food for thought. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.